Mr. Chairman, the votes are 13 yeas, 5 nays.
It passes.
Don't usually hear celebrations following Senate committee votes, but there were spontaneous cheers of "Yes, we can" from the crowd after a landmark immigration bill cleared the Judiciary Committee last night. It's an important first step in what will be a long process. The bill now moves to the Senate floor. The bill got new life when Patrick Leahy, senator of Vermont, Democrat, withdrew its most contentious element, an amendment that would have granted gay and lesbian couples equal treatment under the law to sponsor foreign-born spouses for green cards. Republicans had threatened to walk away from the bill because of that provision. Leahy said he's going to try to fight that battle another day, perhaps with an amendment on the full Senate floor. The bill, if passed, would open a pathway to citizenship for 11 million undocumented immigrants. It would also beef up border security, expand visa availability for low-skilled workers and immigrant entrepreneurs in science and technology. A lot of attention has been paid to the fact that the bill would also allow people who came to the U.S. illegally as children, so-called dreamers. It would enable them to get green cards. So what does the immigrant advocacy community think of the bill? Well, for that perspective, we heard from Jacki Esposito. She's the director of immigration advocacy at the New York Immigration Coalition. I spoke with her earlier today. Jacki, what is the coalition's take on this immigration deal that's in place? Do you anticipate the coalition advocating in favor of its passage?
Well, it may be too soon to tell where we'll stand on the ultimate bill, but certainly we are pleased with the start that we've seen come out of the Gang of Eight's proposal, as well as the direction it's gone in the Senate Judiciary Committee. We've had some disappointments, and we'll continue to work to improve the bill as it goes through the process, but we certainly think it's a strong starting point.
This is, though, far from the bill that the coalition would write if you were empowered to write the bill yourself, correct?
That's absolutely true. We recognize in order to get bipartisan support that compromises have had to be made. I think the real question for us is, at the end of the day, we'll be looking at each of the provisions to determine whether or not they keep immigrant families together.
It's almost as though something better than nothing at this point.
Well, I don't know that we'd say that something's better than nothing. I mean, immigrant communities have developed quite a bit of power, and I think the November elections demonstrated the power of the immigrant vote. And so, you know, there are certain non-negotiable demands. For instance, a path to citizenship is something that anything short of that will not be successful reform. So we really do need to take a look at the reforms and make sure that they'll have an impact on our communities and keep our families together. That's the real question here.
But Jacki, you mentioned the path to citizenship. 13 years being the median, I guess, path to citizenship for an undocumented worker who's here now. I mean, who knows how many policy changes we could have between now and 13 years from now.
That's absolutely right, and that's one of the areas that we're very concerned with. You know, I spoke with a young woman today who came into the country 3 months after her 16th birthday, and she wanted to know, will I qualify for expedited treatment under the bill as a so-called dreamer? And I'd had to tell her she would not. And that's a very difficult thing to tell a young person who is, excited to get on with their future, has graduated college, and is ready to contribute to the American economy. So the 13 years is punitive. It is too long. It shows how harsh this bill currently is, and it's one of the areas that we have and will continue to push on our leaders in Congress to change.
Jacki, the border triggers aspect of the deal right now, that it's all contingent on beefed up security on the border. I know that's been an area of concern for you. Why is it, and what's your concern going forward with it?
Well, there are a few different concerns. One is we feel that the triggers are an obstacle to the path to citizenship. We don't believe that the two should be connected. In other words, the path to citizenship should be separate from questions around border security and immigration enforcement. Secondly, we know that the border is more secure today than it has ever been. We know that unlawful crossings are at historic lows. And in the northern border, for instance, in places like upstate New York, where we have members located, we know that Border Patrol agents are looking for things to do. They have so little to do right now that they're helping local law enforcement translate when they get 911 calls. Now, we don't think that that's a good use of our taxpayer dollars. We think it's really giving in to a lot of the rhetoric around border first, border security first. We think all those benchmarks have been met. And we need to really be moving forward with comprehensive immigration reform that focuses on keeping our families together, improving the lives of the 11 million who are here, and moving forward with real common sense solutions.
Finally, Jacki, this still has to go through the entire Senate. It just made it through judiciary, and then after that it would have to go through the entire House. If there are changes to be made, it's likely to, I guess, weaken it from the standpoint of immigration advocates like yourself in the coalition. Is this thing at its base level for you yet? How much more are you prepared to negotiate in order to get it past the Senate and the House and still make it make sense for immigrant communities?
In terms of what we're willing to compromise, it's in some ways too soon to tell, because what we've seen as the process has unfolded is, sometimes the compromise, there are creative ways to get to a place where both sides are happy. And I'm confident that that will continue to happen. But certainly, we see this bill right now as incredibly harsh. We think that the spending at the border is astronomically high. And we think the path to citizenship is far too long. So there's very little room to make the bill any more harsh and still have it be meaningful reform.
All right, so I want to talk about some of the parts of this bill that are going to go to the full Senate floor. First of all, 13 years on average to get through. 13 years ago, we hadn't gone through Bush v. Gore. We hadn't had 9/11. A lot can change in 13 years.
The worst thing about that particular piece of it, the 13 years doesn't click in until you have 90% border security, which is, some absurd number that no one's really clear how we get to. Some of the triggers in this, the dreamers who actually come here legally and have since aged out are not included in the bill. The elimination of diversity visas, and there are some huge problems with the bill.
Dominic, the border security thing, do you think that's just to appease some critics in the Republican Party, or do you think there's still a lot of concern about somehow the border being our big Achilles heel here?
Yes, to answer your question directly, but remember, this thing has to get through the House. So even if it makes it through the Senate, the question is, it's got to get through the House. That's the wild card factor, and you've got to have some red meat in there from those Republicans.
Brandon, you're a Republican. You can probably speak for the entire party, right?
Hopefully. No.
As it's constructed right now, can this thing pass the House?
I think it can pass, but the issue is I don't think it'll pass necessarily because of the merit. I think it'll pass because if Republicans want to see 2016 in future races, the image has to be there that they support any kind of immigration reform. And let's also talk about, when we're talking about immigration reform, Bloomberg said something that was very interesting. This is going to pass because when we're talking about who's doing the STEM-related jobs, science, technology, engineering, and math, a lot of them are immigrants. And so when we're talking about the future of the workforce, I think it would be very foolish for Republicans not to support this particular legislation.
He's absolutely right, and we've discussed it on this show before. Yep. The Republican Party nationally has to expand its base. They've written off huge pieces of the electorate to date. If they don't make a run at Latinos, they're going to have a problem.
Well, if that's the case, then why move the bill to sell? Why not just hold with a firmer line that would appease more in the immigrant community, as opposed to, let's say, beefing up border security or going from 13 to 15 years on? I mean, why appease the GOP even more?
Cannot get to a new immigration bill and not deal with border security.
All right.
You just can't.
He's right.
What did STEM stand for again?
Science, technology, engineering, and math.
Not only we're falling behind in all those areas, we're falling behind in knowing what STEM stands for.
Well, and that's a problem. And to be honest with you, if we're not, I strongly believe that the immigration reform is the key to really talking about the future of American workforce. I mean, it's a bigger bill than I think even Washington is really making it out to be.
No. We gave it 4 minutes. That's about enough time. Up next, IRS officials come under heavy fire today from angry lawmakers. One IRS official even took the fifth. We'll have the highlights from that testy exchange next.